be in the record, given the statement on the statute.
Enter this into the
State that, read that into the record.
read that in its entirety.
Yes. And then at the end, ask for ratification. That's the requirement of statute.
And ask for that
That's what the ratification.
before we give each.
John, the answer to your question was Monday. Ran Monday.
Okay. Yesterday.
As soon as you can get it in.
Okay. So what this is going to say, Monday was
When did we post it?
that one. Because there is lag time in getting it.
Constituting a one-day notice.
Right. That it doesn't matter how many days. In essence, we had however many days resulted from the board meeting that we previously held where we announced it. But in terms of publication, that was a notice received. And if you'd like me to address this part of the you reading anything in, I'm happy to do that too. Want me to address this? The need for this?
When I sit down after we have the pledge, I just say this is being read into the record. You guys about ready? Frank? Gene?
Yeah, we did post it on Friday.
Stand for the pledge, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, just a reminder that tonight's meeting is one subject and one subject only, and when we have comments from the board or comments from the public, it'll be restricted to the Fifth Third situation we have in front of us. I've been asked to read into the record, I guess, the justification, John, for the special meeting. Is that correct?
It's the justification for the emergency nature of the special meeting.
All right.
For the record, this special meeting of the Sun and Lake of Sebring Improvement District is called to order. This special meeting was scheduled at the regular board meeting held on January 13th, 2012, for the purpose of allowing the board additional time to determine all factors necessary for consideration of the amended and restated forbearance agreement with Fifth Third Bank, and to allow for desired amendments to the said agreement to be inserted through negotiation. Section 189.417 Florida statutes allows for a meeting to be held on an emergency basis as necessary with reasonable notice, so long as it is subsequently ratified by the board. The meeting has been properly advertised on January 16, 2012, constituting a one-day notice in a newspaper of general circulation within Highlands County. The meeting constitutes an emergency in that demand has been made by Fifth Third Bank to resolve the issue of whether the district is to enter into a forbearance agreement in sufficient time for a meeting of the bank committee, which meeting must be held prior to the meeting of the bank board of directors. The board attorney and at least one member of the board of supervisors will not be available to hear this matter on the only other dates available for such consideration, specifically January 18 through January 20, 2012. After January 20, 2012, insufficient time remains for the bank committee to consider the matter prior to the meeting of the bank board of directors. The matter has previously been heard as a regular action agenda item at the January 13, 2012 meeting and public input and discussion was had at that time, in addition to the public discussion to be held at this special meeting on January 17th, 2012. Consideration of this matter in a timely fashion constitutes an emergency, as failure to do so may well result in a very expensive and extensive litigation and a material change in the district's position that could be detrimental to the district. It is in the district's best interest to proceed forward with this meeting on an emergency basis. Prior to proceeding further, I hereby request ratification of the board that the matter constitutes an emergency and will be considered at this date and time. Is that a roll call item?
Yes, sir.
Jalixa?
Move to ratify is what was needed, sir. Sorry. Need a motion to ratify in a second.
Okay, let's have the motion.
I move to ratify the emergency.
Second.
Any comment? Public comment? Board comment? Jalixa?
Supervisor Guglielmi?
Yes.
Supervisor Halbig?
Yes.
Supervisor Johnson?
Yes.
Supervisor Gangemi?
Yes.
President Miller?
Yes. John, tell us at this time exactly where we are with regards to the previous motions and resolutions and so forth, so we know exactly how we're to start.
Yes, sir. Prior to beginning, the reason I came rolling in so late, my apologies for that, but I was waiting on a response email from Mr. Searle, which I did receive. It came in late and came in about 5:23 to be exact, and I got it about 5:25 and printed it off. And if you'd like, I can distribute that to the board and then brief you on where we're at. So, to synopsize things, at the last board meeting held on Friday, there was the issue of the wording in the agreement. As I recall, the concerns of the supervisors were as follows. We had asked Lewis, Longman, and Walker to review the document I provided to you at that time, a copy of their review, their comments with respect to the forbearance agreement. The key points that we were looking at is A, is there a default on the part of the district? B, are we authorized to impose a 1% collection fee? C, can we recoup our foreclosure costs and the sales proceeds? If there were other minor things associated too, but I think those are the big points. Lewis, Longman, and Walker responded in the positive for each of those points on behalf of the district. The bank's position, I believe I've stated it in the email that I sent to Mr. Searle, which you have before you and had previously been provided, I believe, is that with respect to the 3 points, the bank was unwilling to allow the district to not be declared in default. Their position being that, look, the note says you're going to pay us, you haven't paid us. Our counter position being, the note says if we're obliged to pay you, but if we don't pay you, then we are obligated to conduct foreclosure proceedings, market and sell the property, deliver the proceeds to
John,
you.
excuse me, let's stop right there and talk about that one point. We've only had a short period of time to look at this thing, but I don't see the D word in here, default. Is there a specific reference to us being in default?
The only reference to default, sir, is in their 2010 letter to us in which they declared us in default. You will not find it in that agreement, and we carefully wordsmith that so that the D word is not there.
Well, I assume that everything we want, other than just a flat statement to the contrary, is in number 3.
With respect to number 3, sir, the concern with number 3 was that it read that the district did not have sufficient funds to pay the note. The concern with that was that we removed that language and say that we did not collect sufficient revenues from the assessment on the Unit 16 Area A and C assessment to pay the note. That revision has been made. They have agreed to that.
So nowhere in this particular agreement, if we do sign it, is there any acknowledgement on the part of the district that we are in default? Is that correct?
There's no acknowledgement on our part there is a default. That is correct. Okay. And as with the other 2 items, the same issue exists, and that is while the bank was unwilling to put in writing that we could get all of our foreclosure costs from the proceeds of the sale, Lewis, Longman & Walker has opined that we are entitled to that. The bank's position is that, look, if we sell it a lot for $3,000, we don't want to pay $2,000 of it in foreclosure costs and only realize $1,000 on a $12,000 haircut here. And so what they are asking us to do is to leave it open to negotiate on a case-by-case basis. I believe Mr. Nagel, if pushed, is not going to relent on this point. Simply put, he is. I don't think he's looking to take advantage of the district, but I also think that he believes what's fair is fair. His position being that you guys at least go back on the tax roll after the foreclosure, and you can collect your assessments. You're still going to get money. We're not. This is all we're going to get out of the deal, and we'd like to be in a position not to be hurt too badly. So, as an example, the case of the Florida International Yachts foreclosure, the per lot cost in that is going to be relatively low. So I don't think you'd hear any squealing from that. On the other hand, if we get a case that is one of those nightmare foreclosures that, we've had a couple of those, they don't want to be in a position of being potentially in the negative or not being able to sell the lot because of the amount of the foreclosure fees. So that's their position, and I don't think that's going to change.
Is it your understanding that the conditions set forward in this latest agreement still is based upon the language contained in the 2008 resolution, district resolution?
The 2008, you're talking about 08-20. That resolution, together with all the other loan documents, in the opinion of Lewis, Longman & Walker, and in my opinion, when you incorporate the statutory provisions of 170.10, as it does, I believe gives the district a right to get its foreclosure costs as part of the judgment. Okay? So,
is there any place in this new agreement, John, that references these costs specifically?
No. Other than it does say remit the net proceeds to the bank. It does say that. That's in there, and that's a good point for us. In the Lewis, Longman & Walker letter, I think, lays out everywhere it would address these things. But again, let me say this, because I don't think we've ever said this, but it occurred to me that this is an important point. Typically, if the bank had a mortgage, for instance, and was entitled to receive for attorney's fees for that, or, for instance, if the district had its own O&M assessment lien, and we were entitled to attorney's fees for our foreclosure of our lien, then what we get usually is a piece of paper that says, here's the amount of your judgment, inclusive of attorney's fees and costs, etc. And then you go to the courthouse steps to sell the property in satisfaction of the judgment. If the only bid is from the plaintiff, us, in other words, we get the full title to the property, but it doesn't matter what the numbers are anymore. We just simply have the title to the property. Our lien merges with that title, and whatever we can get for it is what we can get for it. So in some cases, we've been benefited greatly, as in many of our past property sales where we got a lot more for it than what it cost us to foreclose. Or in today's environment, we typically get a lot less. Now, the bank's in an unusual position in that typically if it were to foreclose its mortgage, same rules would apply. But this is different because the bank is not in privity with the lot owner. See, the bank's in privity with the district's in privity with the lot owner, the district has the lien on the lot, the district's lien is being foreclosed, we get our attorney's fees in foreclosing the lien, we then get title of the property, which we hold on behalf of the bank. The difference here is whenever we sell the property, it's not ours to either win or lose on. It is the bank's problem. If we get less than the amount owed and we recoup our attorney's fees out of that, they end up on the short end of the stick. So
the worst case scenario is that we'll have a squabble at the end of every sale. Is that
that's a possibility. But I don't think the bank is going to want to go to litigation over that, nor likely are we.
Do you have any other introductory remarks, John?
No, sir. If you're tired of hearing from me,
Well, no. What I'd like to do...
There is one other thing that's important to address, sir. Thank you. That's the marketing agreement that we discussed with Sheehan Realty. Okay, that marketing agreement, the bank was in agreement to make the changes to the marketing agreement, no questions about that, to limit that to the exclusive right of sale to those lots that are held by the district for the benefit of Fifth Third Bank. And so the only lots that are held for the benefit of Fifth Third Bank are the ones that we have received title to by virtue of the Unit 16 assessments. There are no other lots that we hold for the benefit of Fifth Third Bank.
And by virtue of the language in that proposal, we were only 182 lots are in play.
I think it's a couple.
Mr. Wright thinks it's a couple hundred. I'm not sure.
There's about 65 that are.
The number in here says 182. That's what I was wondering. It seems quite low to me.
There are about 65 that are bank only liens, and then there's 100 and something. I've got it in my office. I just don't remember the exact number, but 100 and something that I have both bonds on them that are held in our name.
Well, by way of procedure, what I'd like to do is suggest it to me that we go in an orderly manner, starting with Frank in terms of board comments, and move across from Dave to Diana, and then Gene.
If I may, sir, there's
Yes.
one other point. The issue of the restrictive covenants that was raised.
Yes.
I tried to reach Mr. Searle on Friday afternoon unsuccessfully. I did not return my call on Monday. We were able to speak today. I did bring up the issue of the restrictive covenants. I would not say that the door is closed on that issue, but he did say that's just too much to negotiate in the short period of time that we have before this must be approved in order to get it to the bank committee and then to the board of directors. So he said, unfortunately, there's not an issue we can address in this. There's just too much to negotiate when you're talking restrictive covenants, the content of the covenants, all sorts of things, and we're not going to get that done today. We wouldn't have gotten it done on Friday either, for that matter. But I don't think the bank has closed the door on that issue is the point I'd like to make.
Well, it's in our interest to proceed with that, isn't it?
I think it's clearly the best interest of the district to proceed, much as it has been in all prior occasions as well.
Well, then, as far as we're concerned, that's still on the table, right?
Yes.
Okay.
John, excuse me, I know it's not my turn, but do we have to have a motion to approve first before we have the discussion, or is that carried over from the last meeting?
I asked, and I haven't gotten an answer on that.
This is background and history I'm giving you right now.
Okay.
Before the board discusses or we have public input, yes, we should have a motion, I think.
Okay. So when you're done, I'll ask for that.
I think I have covered all of the main points that I was asked to address. I've indicated to you that the foreclosure expense and the 1% collection fee, the bank is not going to allow that language to be in there, but they're also not insisting on negative language for that point. We did get the Unit 16 assessment language in. We did get the language in the listing agreement, and the restrictive covenants issue is still floating. I know there's still some minor issues about the numbering of the paragraphs and all that, but I'll tell you now that I tried to get in that thing and renumber them, and the word program just is not going to let me do that. It was too, it wouldn't do it. I tried every which way I could to get that done, and I think that's probably why it exists that way now. But you know, that's all I have, sir.
Okay, so we have Resolution 11306 on the table, and that is a resolution of the Sun and Lake of Sebring Improvement District to approve that certain amended and restated forbearance agreement with Fifth Third Bank regarding the Unit 16 Area A and C assessments. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve Resolution 2012-11306.
Second.
Frank, you're up.
You know, I read this and reread it and reread it 3 or 4 times. You know, they're asking us to trust them on these foreclosure costs, which could be substantial. And yet we get a document like this where they try to tie everything down. I guess the way I look at it, we're trying to hold the line for 14 months, and that's good. But why did they have to put this other language in there? That's what I don't understand. Why did they omit certain things? You know, if we start foreclosing on these lots and they force us to without reimbursement, we can be in a heap of trouble.
I would say this, sir. In my opinion, if they ordered us to do a massive foreclosure, then it's in our best interest to seek a judgment that we are entitled to our foreclosure costs.
In other words, the original resolution is not dead. The original contract is still there.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I don't know where to start. I've gone through this thing time and time again and time and time again. And I really don't think it's in the best interest of the district to approve this, and I'll give my reasons. Number one, I don't agree with the forbearance agreement, and there are several items, and I was working off the marked up version of it, and I sent you an email, John, on some of, and two of the things were corrected. One in the marketing proposal that was corrected, and they struck it where it says say collection of assessments. That was corrected. Us saying collection of assessments. The 1% collection fee, that's still not in the agreement, and according to Lewis, Longman, and Walker, we're entitled to that. I got a real problem with it was on page 2, paragraph 2. This is in the marked up agreement because that's the one I've been working on. That's the only one I can refer to because I got so many of the other ones I get confused. And it says, in the event of an inconsistency or conflict between the provisions of the loan documents and this agreement shall control. They're talking about the forbearance agreement. So all bets are off as far as that statement says. That's a pretty bold statement, I think.
When in conflict.
Pardon?
When in conflict, it says.
When in conflict. And I can see there might be conflict. There was on page 4, they struck out the statement beginning with the and ending with the bank. That was district shall be entitled to collect the expenses of foreclosures from the gross sale proceeds of any lot, inclusive of cost and attorney fees prior to remittance of the net proceeds to the bank. Prior to is the big word there. And this agreement that we're asked to sign moves us from first place to last place as far as the proceeds of the sale of the lot. Lewis, Longman, Walker says in their in their letter, if I can find it. I got so many pieces of paper here, I can't. Here it is. I want to refer to two documents here. One is Lewis, Longman, and Walker letter that says the district, in the paragraph, the district is entitled to retain the cost of foreclosures from payment to the bank. In the last sentence, it says these costs out of the proceeds prior to forwarding the same to the bank. So Lewis, Longman, and Walker says prior to. There was also another letter that you wrote to the Board of Supervisors on a possible potential liability. And in the last paragraph of the first page of that, you said, in conjunction with any sale of the property, the district would be reimbursed for this cost of the foreclosure from the sale proceeds. So, there is also in this forbearance agreement, there's two attachments. One is a realty attachment, which gives the exclusive sale of the properties owned by the district for the bank, the right to sell the properties. And it also gives the bank complete control over the cost, along with the realty company, the cost of it. And it looks to me like what they're probably going to do is mark to market whatever they can get out of it, which is fine. I'd just soon see the property sold too. But they'll mark to market, and we'll never get our foreclosure money back. We're not going to get any of it back. And I don't care. You can say they're good guys, but they want their $10 million, and they don't want to wait 20 or 30 years for it. They want it as soon as they can get it.
Let me clarify. I never said they were good guys. I never said they were good guys, though. But I also
you said they would work with us. And
they did represent that.
I appreciate that.
They did represent that.
There's another point that I was trying to make, but I, as usual, got confused. Find my notes, and I'll be back with you. This also flying in under the radar. Everybody's focusing on the forbearance agreement is a foreclosure plan. The main concern is a foreclosure plan, specifically where it says the district funding. In other words, if you look at the foreclosure plan, if I can find it, in the foreclosure plan, it says this: if necessary, district funding and attorney staffing levels can be escalated to implement a more robust foreclosure plan. Also, it says, and this is the one that really gets me, it says the goal for the first year of processing is 300 cases. Now, we have $150,000 in our budget for foreclosure and I think Supervisor Johnson touched on this at the last meeting a little bit. We got $150,000 for foreclosing on Fifth Third properties in our annual budget. But that wouldn't near cover 300 cases. 300 cases at the normal rate of foreclosure, which is, even though we've got some bundled, $2,000 a case, that's $600,000. That's 4 times what we have in our annual budget. And I don't think we can, in other words, if we sign this agreement and this foreclosure plan becomes part of it, which is what it says it is, then we're sticking our neck out and saying, this is what we're going to do. We're going to foreclose at 300 lots of the first year. We're going to ramp up your business and throw special more funding to implement a more robust foreclosure plan, and we're bound by the agreement. And I'm not going there. That's too much of
too much of a liability for the district right now. I think something like that would have to be a board decision as to whether or not we're going to spend all that money and in the rate in which we do it. And you can try to scare me, or somebody can try to scare me all they want. They might say tomorrow, foreclose on everything. Well, that's fine, but there still has to be some rhyme and reason and some control to it. And I think we're giving away it's an open checkbook. We're giving away the ranch here. I probably got more to say, but I'll come back to it. I'll think about it because I got too much in front of me right now. But I don't think we should sign this thing, and I'm not going to agree to sign it.
John, Mike, we got all sorts of numbers being thrown around regarding the foreclosures and what's in line. Can we get some sort of a clear idea of exactly what we're dealing with here? Because Dave has mentioned 300. I got 273 in here. I got 182 in another place. Exactly what? And also, I thought our line item for Unit 16 foreclosures was 120, not 150, but I may be wrong. But can we get some sort of fairly clear understanding of what numbers we're talking about? Because it's quite important.
Yes. I just don't have them off the top of my head. I can tell you there are generally 400 non-performing properties, more or less.
Well, of those, how many are just the Fifth Third properties? Is that the 182?
They're all Fifth Third.
Well, I mean alone, without Phase 5 bond.
Without Phase 5, I have not calculated that. I can tell you how many we own that are Phase 5 only. I'm sorry, Fifth Third only. But I have not gone in and calculated how many of the other ones there are.
It seems like we did calculate that. I don't mean to countermand you, but I thought we had a spreadsheet to that effect that we sent to Mr. Searle, and they did the analysis as well. As I recall,
that's right, we did.
We did that.
We did do that. We have that information. I just don't have it in front of me.
But until the Phase 5 issue is resolved, I cannot imagine there being a foreclosure of a Fifth Third Phase 5 issue. The money just doesn't make sense.
Right.
Right now, we, according to this, the district owns 65 lots free and clear.
That's correct. That are Unit 16
clear of
only.
Phase 5 bond at any rate, and 153 lots still subject to the Phase 5 bond plus Fifth Third.
Right.
Yeah.
And that percentage is still pretty true across the board. So it's roughly 1/4 to 1/3 of
these
the
lots are not the problem. The problem are the ones that aren't foreclosed.
That's correct.
Okay, these are pretty well set.
Well, the ones that have the Phase 5 bond on them are definitely a problem for future marketing.
Another
issue.
Match that we have to settle. But that's between Fifth Third and
correct.
Okay, but these lots here are fine. We're all set with these. The
for
foreclosure
65
costs
lots,
have already gone through.
And Mr. Nagel has stated that the bank is looking to see what happens with those 65 lots before they talk about doing anything else, simply because of the issue of potential loss of the property to tax deed and other related issues.
I guess that's all I've got. I'll come back later.
Well, I have the same problem with the foreclosures as I've raised that question. And I think, too, as Supervisor Guglielmi alluded to earlier, we've kind of gone from, let me show you, from here to here. We have a document that tells us what our legal obligations are. One of those is the foreclosures, and I understand that problem. But we're now giving up, in a sense, to the bank. We're being asked to trust them that we'll work this thing out case by case. I don't know what happens if we can't work it out. Who prevails? It would appear that our loan document does. But then again, there's language in the document that says if we fail to abide by anything in this forbearance agreement, they can terminate the agreement at any time, and I don't know what all that means. But I agree, we don't have the money in our budget. We have 182 lots. It's in their foreclosure plan. They're specifically identifying 182 lots. And they have indicated, if we say $1,500 a lot, that's $273,000 on the first phase of this, and then they say they want us to go in and do more. So we're talking upwards of about $600,000 by the numbers they put in this forbearance agreement. I know I'm willing to do the foreclosures, but I think we have to be in the driver's seat. We're now saying that we'll work this out. I thought a legal document was set up to work things out before you get into that squabble. So I think it should be more specific. And as I go through this document, it seems like things are all kind of left up in the air, which leaves us at some sort of a risk. For instance, we talk about modifying plans, meeting every year and modifying the plan, the forbearance plan, not the forbearance plan, the foreclosure plan or the marketing plan, which I'll mention some things on that also, but the marketing plan. Well, what happens if we can't agree? I mean, it should be saying there, if nothing else, as mutually agreed. It sounds like we're willing to sit down and talk with them, and if they want something, we're either going to have to acquiesce or argue forever. That doesn't seem like a very good plan to me. I would rather have it spelled out in the beginning, and I realize we're short on time. But on the other hand, if we did nothing, I understand the possibility of litigation. But we're the ones, according to Louis Longman, that are in a position where we're okay. So I'm not so sure why we are moving 90% of the way in the bank. I'm not just using those numbers. It appears to me that we're moving more than 50% of the way, and they're not coming our side. And they're the ones that are actually wanting this done because they're having board of directors meetings. So I don't know. I just am not comfortable. I said that at Friday's meeting, in rushing to judgment on this, because I don't think that we have pinned it down to a definitive statement as to what is going to happen. There are a lot of things. The marketing, I agree. Again, that's another one where if we're not happy with the way the marketing's going, they've defined what we have to do. The district has to do such and such and such. I'm not so sure why we're taking all of this in a sense by doing all that. I understand they can tell us to foreclose on all these lots, and as Dave said, that's what happens. That's what happens. I don't think possibly it's able to get done. But I want to work with them, but they don't appear to be very flexible at this point. And especially when we have a loan document that we are really complying with. We're complying every bit as we've spent all our money last year on foreclosures for Unit 16, Fifth Third lots, or most of it, I guess, not all of it. And we set up our schedule. We set up our plan or our organization here to do that. Get their lots first. I don't know what else they want us to do. It's unfortunate that this has happened. I mean, I would never leave a bank strapped, but they're big boys. They got to put their big boy pants on and understand that they made this loan, and now they have to deal with it. So I'm very reluctant on this foreclosure plan because I just see $600,000 being expended, of which we may see a small portion come back. So, I don't know why they specifically took it out either. They took it out of the forbearance agreement. It's in the loan documents, but they take it out and they won't concede any of it. So that just makes me wonder. They know more than I do as to why they're doing it. So it makes me very uncomfortable.
First of all, I want to thank Mr. Wright and Mr. McClure for the work they've done on this, and I know it's been going back and forth. But I'm very positive that all the board members have spent an enormous amount of time looking through all these documents, and I can only come up with these guys made the contract. They made the deal. They didn't have a takeout. They should have had someone or some bank entity or some mortgage company way back when Bank of America said, we're bailing out. So, according to Lewis, we're not in default. We were only a conduit to transfer of funds from the landowners to the bank. We were allowed to take foreclosure money. They never balked at that. They were given all the money that we collected, less the 1% collection service fee, which is typical of any bank. They didn't balk at that. This isn't a general obligation bond. This is just a bond that's collateralized by the properties that were improved, and that's their only hold on us. So if they decide to go with litigation, then that's their prerogative. But I think we fulfilled all the requirements in the contract that was due from us. And to come down and like say, well, this has to be done right away because you've got a board meeting you have to attend, and they're probably getting ready to go to Ohio and say, there's something wrong down here. Who made this loan? And what are we going to do about it? They're forcing our issue by bringing in a marketing company. First, they forgot to take out all and any lots in here. Oh, that's just a misprint. I get very curious about when people have misprints in contracts. This is the word, and this is what they said they would want it to do in the note. So to be rushed into this and saying, oh, we'll talk about it later, it's like when you drive your car out of the lot. You can talk all you want. Unless it's on a piece of paper, you're not going to get any satisfaction. So I have a real difficult time to approve this. And I know we may be spending some money on litigation, but there's nothing down the pipeline that says that all of a sudden they can turn around and say, you know what, I think we made a mistake. By their own admission and by their board members saying, we're a big company, we have experts that looked at all this, and we're able to take the risk that's involved. Don't worry about it. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not going to worry about it. I put tons of time into this. I've got a suitcase behind me with every note and probably every email that went back and forth between the attorneys and the general managers and everything else. I don't feel comfortable with saying, you know, trust me, we're not like the others. So I'm not for it.
Gentlemen, I have three areas to address. I'd like to go back to the numbers relating to these foreclosures. And these pages, I guess, aren't numbered, but I'm looking at the document that we got here at 5 o'clock, and it's a page that has Unit 16, assessment only foreclosures. I want to read this, and let's see where we are. It said, the district has previously been directed by the holder of the note secured by the Unit 16 assessment, Fifth Third Bank, to foreclose on 218 properties, which are currently titled in the name of the district as record title holder with the bank as a beneficial owner. Have we foreclosed on 218 properties?
I don't know that we have foreclosed. I think we have acquired. Some of that has been by deed in lieu of foreclosure. Some has been foreclosed.
Well, is that 218 number correct?
Yes. I believe that is, yes.
Okay.
That's about right.
Okay, and then as Frank mentioned, 65 lots are free and clear of the Phase 5 bond, and 153 lots are still subject to the Phase 5 bond. We have to get back to the 182 properties that I guess are in play. John, several meetings ago we talked about the issue of foreclosing, the costs involved, and the schedule, and it was your feeling at that time that we're talking about a multi-year situation. Is that correct? Through the foreclosure process?
Again, if the bank were to say, we want everything foreclosed right now, you're going to have to go out and hire somebody to get that done. I couldn't possibly do that in my reduced staff.
But it would still be a multi...
I think the bank anticipates a multi-year effort as well, based on our discussions, based on the matrix they prepared.
With regards to the properties that hold both Phase 5 and Fifth Third bonds, that would be a stalemate, right, until they resolve the issues between the two of them? what would be our position on that?
I don't know that we have a position. The issue is exactly as you have stated. It is a stalemate with the combination of the two outstanding liens against the property. The values can never be equal to the duplication of the liens, or both liens together. And the worst part is, even if we were to foreclose on the Unit 16 assessment, what that means is now the district title merges, the lien merges with the title, and so now it becomes just a district-owned lot subject to Phase 5 only. So if the lot's worth $7,000 hypothetically, and the Phase 5 lien is $8,000, the lien exceeds the value of the lot after foreclosing the Unit 16 assessment, placing the bank in an untenable position.
Oh, the actual language in the document says that the NRPI, or whoever holds the Phase 5 bonds, the individuals, have threatened to sue if there's any foreclosure. I mean, it's stated right here. So the worst, I'm looking at the worst case scenario regarding foreclosures is somewhere in the neighborhood of 182. Is that right? Am I right on that?
I believe you are correct, sir.
I'm just trying to get a order of magnitude. The second point I want to ask about was during the process. Now, I don't know who was, it went 2007, something was signed in 2008. You were obviously still involved. Mike was not. Board members were involved. Frank, were you on the board at that time when this was?
2008 is when I came on the board.
Okay. Had this document been signed or was about to be signed?
When it was signed, but there was a previous document signed in 2006, the original loan.
Okay. Okay. Was anybody involved in that? That's on the board?
I was on the board.
You were
2008.
2008, but not 2006.
I don't think there's anybody there.
John, you're the sole survivor. My point is this. You followed the development of this situation and the loan and the agreement step by step. And we relied on you. And don't get nervous, I'm not going to point any fingers. But you've been involved in the whole process in terms of getting this thing to the point where documents were signed. Is there anything in your mind or your memory that would give us any cause for concern in how this developed, how these properties were represented, how our interchange with the bank was conducted? Was there anything that would cause you to be uncomfortable if this whole situation was reviewed?
First, let me state that Bryant, Miller, and Olive represented the district on this whole deal, not me.
Well,
okay.
But you're our guy.
I'm your counsel, yes, but okay. I'm just saying, just so you know, and they represented the district, you, our board, in the negotiation of this loan. It was Bryant, Miller, and Olive that produced Fifth Third Bank with this bond anticipation note, which frankly is a concept I was unfamiliar with and had never heard of. So I have no idea what representations were made through Bryant, Miller, and Olive with all their many banking contacts to these folks regarding the short-term nature of this loan, or representations about Bank of America and who would do what. I was not privy to any of that. So
well, who set the values on the properties?
Pardon me?
Who set the values on the properties?
Well, I can't answer that either, but I can say very clearly whoever did it was on good ground at the time it was set, because the value of these properties was clearly established through any number of sources, either through tax deed sales, through arm's length sales, all of which were certainly high enough to support any type of loan of this nature. We're talking $30,000, $40,000 as a base price for any property in the district. Golf course lots are going at over $120,000 at the time. So, this loan was considered, no doubt, an excellent loan by Fifth Third Bank at the time it was made.
Well, Friday's meeting, you made the statement that if litigation occurs, they're going to come and turn over every rock and pebble and so forth.
They will.
Does that make you uncomfortable?
I'm not entirely comfortable with that. The one thing I know of that does concern me is we represented that, I've forgotten the exact language, but it's something to the effect that No. No, we represented that they would have a first and prior lien as to the assessments. Now, the problem with that is, of course, with Fifth Third Bank out there, who has the first and prior lien? And my representation to the bank at this point, which they seem to have accepted, is that, and this is all I can think of, that their lien is the pledge, our pledged revenues received. So as relates to the Phase 5 loan, you have the revenues received for the improvements for the road and the drainage, and as to their Unit 16 loan, you have the revenues received for their improvements, which is to make the lot a marketable lot. So you've got the addition of the central water and sewer lines, the sidewalks, the improvements of that nature. In some instances, and in some, of course, where they have the sole lien, all of those improvements are made, including the roads and drainage. So, how would a court interpret that? I can't tell you, but I wouldn't say I'm without being nervous about it.
If litigation, well, one thing of all this, to me, is the constant, is our obligation to foreclose upon demand. I don't see any variance or flexibility or anything in that language. We are committed to foreclose. Now, if litigation occurred, would our foreclosure procedures be suspended during that process?
I would expect that the bank could make demand upon us, and I do not believe our obligations would be suspended just because it was litigation. I think if they demanded us to foreclose, we would have to proceed.
Yeah, the last point I wanted to make was the Lewis and Longman Walker letter. As Supervisor Halbeck stated, that's a pretty clear document.
There was nothing in it I did not understand, sir, when I read it.
When I say clear, it was definitive in terms of our position.
Yes, it was.
And yet, I felt Friday I don't want to say we're uncomfortable, but this is pretty straightforward stuff. It goes right back to the language contained in the original documents and in the resolution and so forth.
Point of order, please. I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's point of order.
Go ahead, Tom.
We've been informed by the bank that there's possible litigation. I believe that on that basis, this matter could be discussed in executive session. What you're discussing right now is public information. The bank's aware of this meeting. They're going to be able to acquire every word that's said.
Tom, I asked that prior to Friday's meeting as far as whether or not we could meet in private on this issue. The answer was that we could not. Is there any change in that?
There is no suit filed.
It's not, the wording is not possible.
Okay. Well, the point I wanted to make, and then we'll open it up for public comment. Is there anything in here that doesn't provide us with a very solid initial position legally?
Lewis, Longman, and Walker has examined the documents. They made that clear that their review of the documents was their opinion was based on that review and that review only. What they are not opining is things they know nothing about. What representations might have been made by Bryant, Miller, and Olive. What representations might have been made by district staff, by district board members. These are things I don't know either.
Well, fair enough, but they examined what they were asked to examine. They came back
solely
with
on those, but I will tell you in our phone conversations, they also stated to me that, look, this is based on our review of these documents. When you actually get into court, anything can happen.
Well, theoretically, that's true. Okay, I'm going to open it up for...
Dick, can I make one comment
before
we do that? We didn't need Lewis, Longman, and Walker to review this thing. I read exactly what they said. Unfortunately, as you know, John, like you said, if this goes to court, anything can happen. You get this in front of a jury, in front of a judge, who knows what decision they're going to make. This is not anybody can read this and understand what it says. And it's very specific. I mean, Lewis, Longman and Walker just clarified it, synopsis it into a small sentence so it's easier to understand. But if you read the whole document, it says exactly what they told us. We're on solid ground. Now, the other question I have, what do you think? Are we going to be in litigation 14 months from now, whether we do it now or not?
I can't answer that. If I had to render what is strictly an absolute yes about this, I think the answer is no. Okay, I think if this is approved, I can tell you from all of our negotiations with the bank staff, with the bank's attorney, with everybody else, they know they've got a bad deal here. They're just trying to work through a bad deal. The bank's attorney has characterized this. He said, we're calling this a forbearance agreement. It's really nothing more than a glorified marketing and foreclosure plan.
Okay, in other words...
And that was his characterization of it.
Yeah.
Because he said, we have watered this down all we can. We'll be lucky to get this past the bank committee, is exactly what he stated. So I'm just representing to you that from the bank's perspective, in my opinion, based on these negotiations, and I could be wrong. Let's be real clear about that. But the reality is, the bank knows they've got a bad loan. They're just trying to maximize their return. I believe Mr. Nagel has stated to Mr. Wright, look, if the tax deals go down, everything else, we could lose it all. We'll get nothing out of the deal. That can happen as well. They recognize that.
Well, 14 months, looking at the bright side, maybe things will change.
I doubt it.
Okay.
I can't imagine the economy changing in 14 months.
Well, if things don't change drastically, then we're going to be right back where we are today in 14 months.
We just might just draft a similar document, extend it, and get different numbers to the foreclosure rate.
And this is all it is. It's just an extension. In other words, just wait and see. That's all we're doing here. Okay.
Well, okay, you disagree. Fine. You weren't there.
Okay, public comment?
Bill Jackson, resident. I haven't heard anything said about the taxes. Once we foreclose, are they still agreeing to pay the taxes on those properties?
That is a great point, Mr. Jackson. I quite agree with your point. And the point simply being that if we expend our district funds to foreclose and they don't pay the taxes and they lose them to tax deed, all money that we spent is wasted and lost.
I would also like to point out what I can see.
Wait, Bill, excuse me for a minute. I don't think that was answered. You said, are they going to pay the taxes on They're
that?
supposed to pay the taxes.
That's
Is that
what's
correct?
Let's talk. Their obligation is to pay the taxes. So, yeah, we can say they're supposed to pay the taxes, but we will also state that that they have lost 2 lots to tax deed where they were supposed to pay and obligated to pay but did not pay the taxes.
Is there any comment from Mr. Nagel along those lines?
Exactly that. I don't think they will pay the taxes to avoid a tax deed sale.
Also, I see where a possible conflict of interest here. Mr. McClure, and I wasn't at the last meeting, so if I'm wrong, excuse me, sort of recommended we approve this. If we approve this, there's going to be a lot of foreclosures going on. And I heard the comment earlier in this meeting, he'll have to upgrade his staff. So what I'm saying is, and whether it's probably not intentional or anything, but that is a conflict of interest. If we approve this and he gets greater business on foreclosures, he gets an advantage out of this if we move along that way. So I would think that the board should consider that recommendations, if followed, might increase Mr. McClure's business.
Well, if you remember earlier meetings, Bill, that you did attend, this subject came up, and you remember there were 50 properties that were bundled to be, I don't want to say bid professionally, but to be...
Yeah, it was to seek basically
to be offered.
Solicitations.
Yeah, I guess I would remind you of that. And secondly, it's not automatic that Mr. McClure is going to pick up all the foreclosures.
Well, yeah, at the meeting it was already said that he'll have to up his staff to do these
That was a unilateral statement on his part.
Okay. Well, I would remind you that this sort of thing happened again in the past with NRPI and foreclosures. I think it's a violation of your ethics. You can't make decisions. You can't serve two masters. And you can't make a decision, help the board make a decision, if you're going to benefit from that decision. And so I would bring that up. That this is something that should be considered, and we should know right off the bat that if we're going to do this, and I don't think we should sign this, that all that foreclosure work is going to go somewhere else. So we eliminate this possibility. And one other thing, even in my Judge Judy law classes, I learned that what these guys say at these meetings, we'll work this all out. We'll do all this, doesn't mean a squat. We are taking an inferior position here. And I would ask, why are we all cringing? Everyone's a lot of litigation involved here. We've got $10 million in utilities in here. Suppose we spend $250,000 fighting this and win. If we lose, we're in no worse position than we are now. So why are we concerned about $250,000 when we just spent $225,000 to have greens redone? It seems like that's not a big amount of money. If we can do it for that, why can't we come up with $250,000? I don't think we should do this. They're bum rushing you. Get all this done. They want it done by a deadline. And I have a policy. When someone throws a deadline on me, I turn around and tell them it's all over. I'm not going to be bullied into a deadline. And I don't think this board should approve this, and I think we should sue them first. We need to go out and get ourselves the finest lawyer in the state and sue them before they get around to suing us, and let them fight our lawsuit instead of us fighting theirs. Thank you.
Did you check your guns at the door?
Guns at the door.
That's okay.
Well, I've been away a long time, and I've had plenty of time to rest.
You came out blazing, so.
Mr. President, we prepared a proposal to solicit responses from local attorneys to basically do the foreclosures in bulk form. We did not go out with that proposal because the bank wasn't ready for us to proceed. At such time as we're directed to, and if we're directed to do the foreclosures, then we're prepared to go and solicit outside attorneys to do that work.
But can the court handle this? Aren't we at the mercy of how fast the court can do these? If they come in and tell us to do 182 foreclosures, what do we think, how long do we think it'll take the court to do those? 6 months, 3 months, 2 years? I mean, we're at the mercy of the court as to how long they can do it. We're not going to be pushing the court.
I would say this to you. My last discussion with the clerk of court was that they were really hurting because there were no new foreclosure cases being filed. And they derived their revenue from such matters. So apparently they would welcome the foreclosures.
But can they can move up their staff to handle 10 times as much?
I can't answer
That's
that.
a cost. So I don't know. I mean, it just seems like, we're worrying about things that may never happen. It just doesn't make sense.
Excuse me, Tom, just for 1 second. John, the original document states that we have to foreclose. Does it not?
Yes, sir.
So irrespective of whether we sign this or not, they can come along and say foreclosing all the lots. Isn't that true?
They certainly have that right.
Okay. So this, as far as the foreclosures are concerned, it's not affected by this document.
It is affected in the sense that
we don't get paid.
They were willing to work with the district to try to schedule the foreclosures that did fit our budget. We had those discussions with them. They understood that, and they were working with us on this priority basis to line that up.
Why are they hesitant to put that in writing?
Ma'am?
Why are they hesitant to put that in the document, that they're willing to work with us to the tune of, if we can put in that we will pursue foreclosures to the extent of our budget? Why won't they accept that if they are really willing to work with us? So that's what makes me uncomfortable.
I guess I don't understand your question. That was the representation.
Not in writing, it isn't.
What they did not wish to put in was that we would be able to recoup all of our foreclosure costs from the foreclosure sale. That's what they did not want to put in.
I don't understand. I mean, we're asking them to do that. That's what's preventing us signing this document, and it's like they won't budge an inch, and there's a reason for it.
I would respectfully, I don't think they have said we will not allow you to phase your foreclosures. That is part of their foreclosure plan to do that. That is not the issue. The issue is recoupment of foreclosure costs from the sales proceeds in full. That's the issue. That's what they are not putting in.
Okay, Tom, go ahead.
Tom Costi. I think the bank showed us their willingness to work with us by stiffing us at that last meeting without even the courtesy of a phone call. I think they probably did exactly what they planned to do. I doubt if they really intended to come in there and subject themselves to questions in public from our board and from the public. I could be wrong at that, but I was embarrassed to see John McClure walk out in that parking lot and place a cell phone call after we had rescheduled the meeting to accommodate these people, that they never even gave us the courtesy of a phone call to let us know that they were not coming. I think that's indicative of the people that we're dealing with. We've got letters in the original documents where they proclaimed their ability to handle the risk of a loan like this. They made a bad loan. They admit it. We know it. Everybody that's looked at it that I know that knows anything about banking has indicated that they're trying to get as much as they can, recoup as much as they can out of a bad deal that they made. And those guys are going to have to go before the board at this meeting that's coming up, and they're going to have to acknowledge that. And I'm sure that they're dreading, if the board hasn't already seen the letter from Mitchell where he indicated to the world that we have examined this loan, we're proficient in this business, we understand the risks, we're big boys, and we can take it. Secondly, I believe that we've put ourselves at the end of the line in terms of getting anything out of whatever comes of foreclosures and marketing of the real estate. Everybody gets everybody by everybody. It could mean really everybody. There's nothing to say that Fifth Third and NRPI, who owns the bond on Phase 5, that they couldn't get together and say, hey, fellas, let's put this behind us. Let's just get rid of this property. NRPI, you run it through your auction.com. We'll split the proceeds. We don't have to worry about Sun and Lakes anymore. They don't even get their foreclosure costs. Do you want to call them and tell them to foreclose, or should we call them and tell them to foreclose? Now we're looking at, what, 600-700 lots? It could be astronomical. And we got no chance of getting it back if we signed this document. Am I wrong?
I'm not sure what you're saying. I think you are, yes. But
well, explain.
Well, you said they could direct us, they could hold an auction.
Auction.com is NRPI's means of selling for foreclosed.
What are they going to sell at this auction?
The lots that we had been instructed to foreclose upon. At whatever they bring. And they agree between themselves that they're going to take whatever they get, split it, and we don't get our foreclosure costs after we foreclosed on all those lots.
But there's nothing that precludes us from bringing an action under the loan documents.
Bringing an action.
Bringing action, that means sue them?
Sue them because we didn't pay the loan?
No, because we didn't get our foreclosure costs back, which Lewis, Holman, and Walker is a fine we're entitled to.
But right now, we're inclined, we can collect that money before they get a dime. Have they ever acknowledged the 1%? We've been
Let me say this to you again, Mr. Costi. There's nothing in the document that says we can't get our foreclosure costs. They're just not putting it up front.
Why?
Well, you'd have to ask them. I think I've explained it about 6 times. I can't go any clearer than that, okay? I'm sorry. If we want to go to litigation, let's just vote litigation.
It's going to go.
Tom, that's the way they're playing the game, and we have to decide whether or not we're going to play the game.
I agree, and I feel as though it's going to end up in litigation at some point in time, and the sooner the better. Well, and negotiated settlements can take place at any point before, during, and after not after, but when litigation takes place. Then we'll cut to the chase, and people will have to put their cards on the table.
Well, I'm not mistaken, John. We can, through our process, we control the flow of funds, right, through the foreclosure process. Is that correct?
Control the flow of funds through the process that we're negotiating now. there is some control over the flow of funds, yes.
Well, there is now anyway, because we foreclose, and we hold that in our name, right?
If I understand what you're saying to this point, if we foreclosed and the property's in our name, and NRPI through the auction company wants to go to a big auction and sell it all, if we did not consent to that, we're record title holder. Now they got to come after us as the beneficial owner to say, yes, we need to do this if we don't consent to that.
That's what I wanted. Is there any other public comment?
Wow, Rusty Carino. I only have one question, and that's this, John. What are the exact rights and remedies that the bank has under the loan document that we have to perform?
I'm not sure I understand your question, but I'll try to answer it this way as I understand it, okay?
Okay.
Our obligations are to levy the assessments, to put the improvements in, to levy the assessments against the property, to collect the assessments, failing to collect the assessments, to foreclose, sell the property, remit the proceeds, in big terms.
Okay. Here's in the contract here in the forbearance on page 3, and I think I touched with you the other day, and they're talking about the forbearance. The second paragraph on the bottom says.
Well, see, which one are you talking about? The one we got tonight?
Page 3.
You got tonight? The one you got tonight?
I didn't get anything from y'all tonight. I'm talking about the forbearance agreement.
What paragraph?
It was the draft.
Okay. What paragraph are you referencing?
I'm on the second paragraph from the bottom on page 3.
What is the number of the paragraph?
It's number 7.
Okay.
Okay, and down where it says, okay, the district acknowledges and agrees that if any breach or default under this agreement occurs, then the termination day shall be deemed to have occurred immediately prior to the applicable default. The forbearance set forth in this paragraph shall terminate, and the bank shall be entitled to exercise immediately all its rights and remedies under the loan document as under applicable law or in equity. So what are their rights? Is it
They would have to prove, as Lewis Lawman Walker has opined, and as I have opined, that the district in some way breached its agreement. We have levied the assessments against the property. Okay. We have administered the contract fully and faithfully. We've levied the assessments. We have billed the assessments. We've made every attempt to collect the assessments. The only issue I can see is whether or not we have adequately foreclosed against the assessments, as I stated in a letter to the board. And so our position on that, again, would be that the reason we have not more aggressively pursued foreclosure is because the bank has directed us not to do so until they review this situation fully. Because remember, as we have talked about several times, by directing foreclosure, things adverse to the bank's position occur. And so the bank realizes that and has not ordered aggressive foreclosure because it could clearly hurt their position. They're in much better position when a tax deed sale comes up to leave their assessment out there, have us file a notice of governmental lien that's good for at least 3 years and maybe more. If a private purchaser purchases at a tax deed sale, it's good forever. If it's a county tax certificate that's sold and is stricken off to the county for no bidders, then that starts the 3-year clock before the land is cheated to the county without the lien. So it's really in the bank's best interest to not foreclose, ironically, than to pursue foreclosure.
So in essence, let me ask you this: prior to this agreement here, to the other foreclosure barons, did they have a foreclosure plan in place?
The foreclosure plan has been negotiated for many months.
I'm not talking about this current one, or I'm not talking about the union. I'm talking
not to my
about.
knowledge. Not to my knowledge.
Not to your knowledge? Okay. Could I get a copy of that attorney's letter?
I think there's copies available over there, Rusty.
Okay, thank you.
You mean the email? Is that what you're referring to?
We don't have the Lewis Longman letter with us.
Oh, I thought he was talking about the new forbearance.
What are you talking about, Rusty?
Second time, Bill, make it quick.
The only reason I bring it up is Bill Jackson, we started talking about them getting together and maybe auctioning this. I believe on the extended Phase 5 agreement, they told us never to foreclose on anything. We were not foreclosing on any lots under that Phase 5 that was not paying because they were collecting a lot of money anyway and they didn't pay much for it. Now let's suppose they do get together with Fifth Third, and they tell us, now we want you to foreclose on all lots that are in non-compliance, and they work it that way. I don't know if it is. I'm just saying that's something that could happen.
And speaking, for what it's worth, Department, okay, but I will represent to you, and speaking with Mr. Spiro about this issue, he stated that when they came down to do an auction, there was not the first single bidder at the auction. That has never happened to them. He said there is no market whatsoever for a vacant lot down here.
Larry? Go ahead.
Larry Bertetto.
I'll forgive you that shirt.
It's not the Denver Broncos either way. It's the Boise State Broncos.
We'll see you next September.
Anyway, I make it short. I'm not going to rehash everything. I feel and agree with what previous individuals have said. And the fact, if we put ourselves back in a situation again in 14 months, right now, we have got, gentlemen, ladies, the best board in Sun Lake that we've had in a long time. 14 months from now, we don't know who's going to be sitting there. And I think the people in this community trust this board right now to make the right decision, and it'll be behind you.
Thank you. Okay, last chance for public comments. I'll bring it back to the board. Are there any final thoughts from anybody on the board?
Yeah, I wanted to walk through a scenario. If they tell us to foreclose on all of their lots, how many lots do we think there are? Just a round ballpark number. 400? 400 that are their lots?
Oh, their lots.
800 at one time I read. 800.
No, ma'am. That number 182 was derived from a rescrub by Tanya. I know she went through everything, and we looked at everything about which ones were Fifth Third only and which ones had both the Fifth Third and Phase 5. And the 182 is the Fifth Third only. I'm almost positive of that.
So
I don't have it in front of me to verify, but I'm almost positive of that.
Right. So when we say one of the things we need to be concerned about is if we don't sign this and they come and they tell us to foreclose on all of their property, our maximum exposure is the 182?
Yeah, I think so.
And that...
They could direct foreclosure of anything that has their lien on it.
Correct.
By the document. So
that's what I'm asking.
Let's don't confuse that fact.
Right. What is that number?
As you have represented, there were initially, I think, 800 lots.
So if you took that number and multiplies it times 1,500 average, that's $1.2 million. Okay. Would be our major exposure. But if that were to happen and they came in here and did this, would we not immediately go to court and say, wait a minute, this can't happen. There's no way that we're ever going to recoup our money, and they're never going to pay us. It's just
if that were to be a viable defense, they would have already come and sued us and said, wait a minute, we're never going to get our money. They're never going to pay us. So I don't think that would be a viable defense, no.
But if we took it to court, could we have a stay on whether or not we have to go ahead and foreclose until it's resolved?
When you go to court, the judge looks just like Lewis and Longman and Walker did at the four corners of the document. Four corners of the document say the district shall foreclose at its expense. Shall foreclose at its expense. So, no, ma'am, I do not agree with what you have stated. I do not believe a court's going to assert any equitable principles or that, gee whiz, this would cost the district too much money or anything like that.
And the other question was, I forgot what I was going to ask you. on this, if we have to foreclose, I can't remember what it was, but there was another question that related to that. So if I think of it, I'll bring it up.
Sure. Just a couple. Okay. Some very important facts that came out in the newspaper this week from Clerk of Courts, Bob Germain. And there are only 599 foreclosure went through 2011, but there's 1,316 are still pending. That's just in Highlands. Doesn't matter. I don't understand how many hours, and if they add this additional amount on it, they're looking at somewhere around 2014 before this even gets to any type of court. Not only that, but if you have the property values that are declining, and they're going to get even less in the future than they're going to get today, based on the number of home permits that were issued, like 71 family permits in Highlands County. How many were in here? There are probably 2 or 3 at the most, I would think. So, just looking at this, even if we go in for foreclosure and they get $3,000 max, I've been to the tax deed sales since June, and I think I've seen maybe 1 or 2 go for tax cert in Southern Lake. Nothing's going on. People do not even show up. And the ones that do show up have done their homework and find out that any of the taxes or assessments outweigh the value of the properties, and they just get up and walk out. So I think there's some things that they left out, and it was done not by accident. It was done by their nervousness about what's coming up with their bank meeting at the end of the month. They're under the pressure to get this done, and they're trying to put the pressure on us.
John, this foreclosure plan that becomes part of this agreement pretty much specifies what we're going to get if the property's sold in the cost of foreclosure suit paragraph, when it says the district may keep any amounts over and above the amount due for the special assessments to offset maintenance assessments and costs of foreclosure. In other words, if we sign this, we go from first to last as far as getting our money back when the property is sold, and that's my main hang up on this whole thing. Also, I've got one other.
Is that true, John?
Whatever it says is exactly right, and I believe his interpretation is correct.
Okay, thank you.
One other question, John. I asked this before, and I sent you an email about it. You haven't had time to respond. You've been working on this pretty diligently. But this Lewis, Longman, and Walker opinion on the Phase 5 issues for their rattling their swords and saying they're going to sue us if we use our statutory right to foreclose for non-payment of assessments. Is there anything in the works for them to give an opinion on that? Because they were going to do that.
They were, and I sent them the Phase 5 trust indenture over that very issue.
Okay.
We do not yet, and you asked me about that, and I couldn't get anybody at Lewis, Longman, and Walker to respond to that issue. So they will respond to us anything we ask them to look at, I'm sure of that.
And they haven't seen this actual forbearance agreement and the attachments themselves.
They have.
They have? Oh, they have. Okay. And that's what they based their other opinions on?
They based their opinions
on the question, or on the questions that you had on it. Okay. All right, that's all I've got. Thank you.
Hey, Julixa, we're going to read the roll now. A no vote by any member indicates that they are not in favor of signing it. Is that correct? A yes vote is to sign it. Yes. Just so we understand, so we're clear.
It was the motion was to approve, so yes.
That's right. Well, I'm just double checking. Okay, do you want to call the roll, please?
Supervisor Halbig?
No.
Supervisor Johnson?
No.
Supervisor Gangemi?
No.
Supervisor Guglielmi?
No.
President Miller?
No. Meeting adjourned.
Talk a little positive money.
Dean, that was a good idea. We had extra copies.
Stockbridge Capital out of Albany, New York, buys distressed properties and distressed bonds. Years, they have purchased these 103 properties from DFC. 82 of them are west of Cortez. They're crap properties. As you know, crap.
Are any of these our
No, these are all
drainage?
DFC owned.
Okay. Well, DFC owns those too, remember?
They're not in the,